Do you want to break the lecturing habit? I'm Nicholeen Peck, and I teach parenting and good communication all over the world through the lens of the principle self-government. And in this video, we're talking about lecturing. I'm so excited for this video. We're going to talk about lecturing. I'm going to share a story from my life about lecturing and what not to do and why. And then I'm also going to talk to you about what you can do if you want to talk to your children about a troubling behavior and do it in a way that is productive and not lecturing, but still you get the problem solved. I know it doesn't sound possible, but it is. So this whole channel is the Teaching Self-Government channel, and teaching self-government is all about good bonding, communication, self-analyzing, making plans for yourself. But when you are raising your children and you are helping them navigate the troubles in life, good self-government training requires open communication. That means that your children should be okay talking to you, telling you things, and you also talking to them. And the thing is that sometimes, even with the best intentions, those little talks fail. How do they fail? Well, that's because people know they should do talking, that children should do listening, but they don't know how to have that talking hit the mark. Lecturing is almost always going to backfire on you. And I know from personal experience. My dad was a communications teacher, a debate coach, an actor. Anyway, long story short, he could talk. I guess that's why I also can talk so much. Just look at all the videos on this channel. If you've subscribed, then you know by now there's probably 1,000 videos on here. That's a lot of talking. I guess I inherited that from my dad. So anyway, Dad was a talker, but that also meant he was a lecturer. And I definitely have done a few lectures in my life too, and I recognized the moment they didn't hit their mark. And that's because I remember when Dad was trying to lecture me to get me to have a change of heart or a change of behavior, and I remember when I shut him off and his lecture didn't hit the mark either. Lectures are not very effective unless a person is wanting a lecture and is open to a lecture. When you start a YouTube video, you are saying, I want to learn something. Please give me a short lecture about fill in the blank, whatever it is. So then you're open to it, you're okay. But when somebody just pours a lecture on you and you didn't go looking for it, you might not be receptive. Such is the case with our children lots of the time when we try to present a lecture to them. For a lecture to be appropriate with our children and to really hit the mark, it needs to come from a very loving place. It needs to come when a relationship is close and established, and it needs to come in a way that feels like it's a unified conversation. We're going to talk about how to do that, but first I want to just tell you something that I learned because my dad was a lecturer. Because Dad was a lecturer, I learned when I was done, and that was usually at about the 30-second mark. After about a 30-second lecture, maybe 1 minute, I knew if Dad was right or wrong. But it didn't matter to me whether he was right or wrong. I was going to hold my ground. Why? Because I was strong-willed. And plus, I didn't want him to think that he could just talk at me all the time and make me change. No one was going to make me change. I wanted to change for myself. So if you have a strong-willed child like me, then you'll know for sure the lecture is not going to work. One time I remember Dad started lecturing me at bedtime. It was probably around 9 or 10 p.m. I knew that he was right about whatever the issue was almost immediately. I knew I was wrong. I was just feeling oppositional and a bit defiant at the time. But Dad was the type that would lecture until he felt like I had had a change of heart. So he kept going and going and going. I was gauging the time. I was like, I wonder how long he'll go. He has to get up at like 5:30 in the morning. I ended up stringing him along until finally the clock read 2 in the morning. He got no sleep. And finally I said, oh, you're right. Yeah, I see that now. I had seen it a long, long time before. I just drug him on. Lecturing is a type of power struggling, and the person who's being lectured at is very tempted to power struggle back. And that's what I did. It absolutely did not work. Another type of communication would have been much more effective. I believe in the principle, planning what you want to say and then say it exactly and then move on, especially when you're talking with someone and you're trying to solve a problem. You're going to keep yourself away from trouble. The type of trouble might include getting overly emotional, saying too much, judging, those types of things. If you just keep the conversation brief and to the point, make sure that you have the spirit of love and calmness with it, and then it will hit its mark most of the time. But there are some times when you need to extend that conversation into a planning session. That's what I'd like to talk about now. So this book here, Parenting a House United, teaches how to create an environment where parents and children all learn self-government. That means they take responsibility for themselves. They train themselves. Now, in this book, I teach certain skills for children that the parents can teach their children that are life skills. In fact, the parents need them too. And then I also teach other skills for parents. There are 5 teaching styles that I focus on for parents. One of those 5 teaching styles is something called a parent counseling session. A parent counseling session is a meeting that you have one-on-one with your child when you talk about one issue, just one. You don't talk about everything that's been bothering you about the person. You say, okay, there is one thing that we need to address and make a plan for. Sometimes that parent counseling session might be related to something new, like, oh, the school year's starting, or we're starting high school now. What's that going to be like? Or we're starting dating, or you're going to be driving, or, I've noticed that you seem to have a hard time getting along with this person. So you're going to pick one thing out and you're going to have a dedicated conversation about that one thing. There is no exact time limit for this type of meeting, although I will caution you to think in terms of keeping it short. Because if you don't, you could fall into the lecture trap, and that's definitely not what you want to do. You want this to be a more powerful situation. So I do 3-day trainings. They are called Parenting Mastery Trainings. When you come to a Parenting Mastery Training, I teach you the entire Teaching Self-Government Parenting program in the 3 days. It is like the speedy, intensive training where you learn it all. Well, in the Parenting Mastery course workbook, we go into detail about each of the skills. We talk about how to handle out-of-control behavior, how to teach the children the skills, how to correct the problems, calmness, the meetings, problem solving, and teaching that to the children. We talk about everything. But this booklet here that is part of the 3-day Parenting Mastery Training, at this point in time, besides my course, I also have an online course, the TSG Parenting course, or the Deep Dive. Those might be the only places where you can actually find this entire script for a parent counseling session. And so what I'd like to do right now is just share with you the steps to this script so that you can have a way to open up a conversation with your child. In the House United book that I held up earlier, I talk about parent counseling sessions in there, but I don't give this many steps. I give some pointers for how to have a good conversation. But I thought for a very long time that people just intuitively knew how to have these types of conversations with their children, probably because I had figured out how to have the conversations with my children. But what I really should have thought of is my dad, who's a communications professor, did not know how to have these types of conversations with me, at least all the time. Sometimes he did. But then there were other times when he would go into the lecture. But if he couldn't even figure it out, and he was a professional at communication, then probably I should have been telling a little bit more. People kept asking how. I kept explaining, this is how you do it, this is how you do it. So finally I said, okay, these are the 14 steps. So I'm going to go through this really fast because this video sadly has to be really fast. So on this page right here, there are 14 steps. I do not have time to go through all 14 of these steps, give examples like I would normally do in a 3-day parenting mastery training, and give you the time to work on it and all of that kind of stuff. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to give you a few key steps for the parent counseling session so that you can start yourself along the track. But I'm really hoping that you will go and get the full 14 steps so that you'll be the most effective. The first thing the parent does is they initiate the meeting in a really non-confrontational way. So maybe you're on a drive or you go for a walk or you say, hey, let's have a popsicle on the porch or something like that. But you just, or maybe you're just doing dishes together or, painting a fence together and you just decide now's a good time. Let's have a conversation. And then what the parent does next is they start to describe the situation that they have noticed, the one singular issue that has a situation attached to it perhaps. So they might say something like, I've noticed that lately you haven't been getting along with your brother. Then they're going to go to the next step, which is, why do you think this might be happening? So now they're going to ask the child a question. They make a statement, an assessment, and then ask the child why that might be happening. Now this is where you listen to what the child has to say. Then after that, what's going to happen is you are going to share some of your perspective. Now, the way that you bring that perspective in is key, making sure that you don't fall into the lecturing traps that could happen there, but making sure that you bring in some truths that maybe your child has not thought of. You might go back to more questions there, more discussion after that. Then you're going to go into the planning phases and the follow-up phases for this parent counseling session. The whole idea of the parent counseling session is to get the child invested. The child might even be choosing their own consequences, maybe negative consequences or positive motivations, which would be positive consequences, in order to motivate them to make a change or to adopt a certain practice, habit, skill, or behavior that they might need to handle this problem. A parent might also use a SOTAS exercise, which is another thing that I talk about in my training. It's a problem-solving exercise that helps develop the prefrontal cortex and helps a child learn how to problem solve. You might do that also right in the parent counseling session. Now, I know that there are so many things that you could talk about. Anything from not getting along with a sibling, to curfew, to suicide, to mental health concerns. You could talk about anything in this parent counseling session. This is the open time where you discuss. There's no wrong answers, there's no right answers. There's discussion, analysis, and planning. And then you prepare for follow through. You help the child take ownership, make a decision that they feel like is best for them. Obviously, if they make a decision that's immoral or somehow going to take them in the wrong direction, you have to say that's not going to work. Let's go back to the drawing board, right? But this is a time where they see you listen, you care, you offer suggestions, but ultimately it's about them getting to choose how to solve this problem when they finally have all the pieces of information there in front of them. And when they see that you care enough to listen and to have this conversation with them, it's amazing how understood they feel, how open they are, and how much more likely they are to engage in open conversations. Let's be real. Why do you lecture? Because they don't talk. That's why. Unless you just like to hear yourself talk, which I guess, could be kind of an ego thing or maybe just a communication style. But usually what happens is the person is sitting there, they don't want to open up. And so the lecturer just starts to fill in the whole situation themselves. And sometimes they misread the situation, which then creates even more distance between them and the person that won't open up. So why not have a conversation that really works? Why not have a parent counseling session? I highly recommend going to teachingselfgovernment.com and getting signed up for a parent mastery training. That is the best training that you can get for the teaching self-government approach to parenting. The best, outside of me coming to your home, which I do sometimes, but I can only do it a few times a year because I have my own life and things I have to handle for myself and for my family. Go and get that training so that you can have that door open again and so that you don't feel like you have to fall into that bad habit of lecturing. It's just going to close people down It doesn't do as much good at opening the door. So go to teachingselfgovernment.com today and find that parenting mastery training. I will see you there. It's the best training ever.